There is a version of calm that most people have never experienced. Not the calm that comes from suppressing what you feel. Not the calm that comes from pretending you do not care. Not the practiced detachment of someone who has learned to perform serenity while their insides are burning. A different kind of calm entirely. The calm of someone who has done enough inner work that other people's behavior has genuinely lost its ability to disturb them. Not because they have gone numb, but because they have removed the hooks inside themselves that other people's words used to catch on. Carl Jung spent decades studying the mechanism behind human emotional reactivity, and what he discovered was not what anyone expected. He found that anger, offense, and emotional disturbance are never really about the other person. They are always about something unresolved inside the person who feels disturbed. Always. Without exception. This is uncomfortable to hear, because it removes the one thing that makes anger feel justified, the belief that someone else is responsible for what you feel. But Jung was not interested in what felt comfortable. He was interested in what was true. And the truth, as he documented it across thousands of clinical hours, is this: no one can disturb a part of you that you have fully understood. That sentence deserves to sit with you for a moment before we continue, because everything that follows builds on it. And if you let it land, it will change how you interpret every emotional reaction you have for the rest of your life. Let us start where Jung would start, with the question most people never think to ask: why does that specific thing bother you? Not why are you angry in general? That is too broad. The question is precise and surgical. Why does that particular comment from that particular person in that particular moment produce a charge in your body? Why does criticism about your intelligence hit differently than criticism about your appearance? Why does being interrupted enrage you, but being disagreed with barely registers? Why does one friend's lateness make you furious, while another friend's lateness does not bother you at all? If anger were simply a rational response to disrespect, it would be consistent. The same behavior would produce the same reaction every time, regardless of who performed it. But it does not. Your anger is selective, it is specific, it has preferences, and those preferences reveal something far more important than the behavior of the person who triggered you. They reveal your wounds. Jung called this the shadow, the collection of everything about yourself that you have rejected, denied, repressed, or refused to look at. Not just your dark qualities, your abandoned strengths, your unfelt grief, your unprocessed fear, your unacknowledged needs, everything that was pushed beneath the surface of your conscious identity, because at some point in your life, it was not safe or acceptable to express it. The shadow does not disappear when you push it down. It waits, and it waits with a very specific kind of patience. The patience of something that knows it will eventually be seen, because it has a strategy for forcing your attention. That strategy is projection. When someone says something that triggers a disproportionate emotional response in you, what is actually happening is not that they have attacked you. What is happening is that they have touched a piece of your shadow, a wound, a fear, a rejected part of yourself that you have not yet integrated. And the pain you feel is not from their words. It is from the contact between their words and your unhealed material. Think about an insult that would not bother you at all. If someone called you a terrible basketball player and you have never played basketball and have no investment in being athletic, the words would bounce off you completely. You might even laugh. There is no shadow material there, no wound for the words to land on, no hook for them to catch. Now think about an insult that would devastate you. Whatever it is, whatever specific criticism would cut deepest, I can tell you something about it without knowing you at all. It targets an area where you already doubt yourself, an area where the wound is pre-existing. The other person did not create the pain, they found it. This is why the same comment can destroy one person and bounce completely off another. It is not about the comment. It is about the landscape it lands on. Two people can hear the exact same words and have completely opposite experiences. One feels nothing because there is no wound in that territory. The other feels everything because the words landed on a bruise that has been tender for 20 years. And this is the insight that changes everything. If the pain is determined not by what was said, but by what already exists inside you, then the solution to never being bothered is not controlling what people say. It is healing what lives inside you that converts their words into pain. This is the foundation of everything Jung discovered about emotional reactivity, and it leads to a conclusion that most people resist with everything they have. If you want to become someone who is never disturbed by other people's behavior, you do not need to change other people's behavior. You need to find and heal the wounds inside yourself that their behavior is touching. This is not a technique for controlling your reactions. This is the removal of the need to react at all. Let me show you how this works in practice. Because the theory is elegant, but the application is where the transformation actually happens. The first shift involves learning to read your triggers as information rather than experiencing them as attacks. Every time you feel a charge, an emotional spike that is disproportionate to what actually happened, you have received a gift. A piece of data about your own unconscious that you could not have accessed any other way. The person who triggered you has, without intending to, pointed directly at a part of your shadow that is ready to be integrated. Jung developed a practice that his students came to call active engagement with the trigger. Instead of expressing the anger outward or suppressing it inward, you turn toward it. You get curious about it. You ask it questions. What specifically am I reacting to? Not the surface event, the deeper quality. If someone interrupts you and you feel rage, the surface event is the interruption. But the deeper quality might be feeling invisible, feeling like your voice does not matter, feeling like you are not important enough to be heard. That deeper quality is where the shadow lives. When did I first learn that this quality was dangerous? Somewhere in your history, there is a moment or a series of moments where the wound was installed, where you learned that being invisible was a real threat, where someone's refusal to listen to you carried consequences that your child's nervous system encoded as genuinely dangerous. The trigger in the present is activating a response that was designed for a situation in the past. You are not reacting to your co-worker's interruption. You are reacting to your father's indifference. Your co-worker just happened to press the same button. What would I need to believe about myself for this to stop hurting? This is the integration question, the one that actually moves the needle, because it reveals the specific belief that keeps the wound open. If being interrupted devastates you because it activates a belief that you are invisible, then the integration work is not about making people stop interrupting you. It is about building such a solid internal relationship with your own visibility, your own voice, your own worth. That interruption becomes what it actually is. A rude behavior from another person, not a commentary on your value. When you do this work, something remarkable happens. The trigger loses its charge, not because you suppressed it, not because you rationalized it away, but because the wound underneath it has been seen, understood, and metabolized. The hook has been removed. And without the hook, there is nothing for the other person's behavior to catch on. The second shift is understanding that other people's behavior is almost never about you. It is about them. And once you see this clearly, the entire dynamic of human conflict transforms. Jung called this projection, the unconscious process by which people attribute their own unacknowledged feelings, fears, and flaws to others. It operates constantly, in every interaction, in every conflict, in every moment of criticism, judgment, and accusation. When someone attacks your character, they are almost always describing their own internal struggle. The person who calls you selfish is usually wrestling with their own guilt about unmet needs. The person who accuses you of being controlling is usually terrified of their own powerlessness. The person who mocks your ambition is usually grieving their own abandoned dreams. This is not a defense mechanism you deploy to avoid hearing valid feedback. Valid feedback exists and it is valuable. The difference between projection and genuine feedback is in the emotional charge. Projection arrives with heat, with contempt, with a disproportionate intensity that reveals it is serving a psychological purpose for the speaker that has nothing to do with you. Genuine feedback arrives with calm, with specificity, with a desire to help rather than to wound. When you learn to distinguish between the two, something shifts permanently. Projection stops hurting you because you can see what it actually is, a window into the other person's psychology. Their attack becomes transparent. You can see the fear behind the anger, the wound behind the judgment, the unmet need behind the accusation. And when you see it, a strange thing happens. The anger you expected to feel is replaced by something you did not expect at all: compassion. Not the forced, performative compassion of someone trying to be spiritual. The genuine, involuntary compassion that arises when you see a person in pain. Because that is what projection always is: pain that has not found a healthier outlet. Jung documented this shift in his patients repeatedly. The ones who had done sufficient shadow work stopped experiencing other people's attacks as personal. They experienced them as diagnostic. Every hostile comment became a piece of information about the speaker's psychology. And when you are reading diagnostic information, you do not feel offended by it. You feel curious about it. This is not emotional numbness. This is emotional clarity. You still feel. In fact, you feel more precisely than before. But what you feel is accurate. It matches reality rather than being distorted by your own unprocessed material. The third shift is perhaps the most counterintuitive, and it is the one that separates people who manage their anger from people who have genuinely transcended it. You stop needing people to be different than they are. This sounds simple. It is not. Because buried inside every instance of anger at another person is a hidden demand. The demand that they should be different, that they should be kinder, more considerate, more fair, more honest, more aware, more like the version of them that would not trigger your wounds. Jung would identify this demand as the ego's attempt to control the external world in order to avoid doing internal work. If they would just stop behaving that way, I would not have to feel this. That sentence is the ego's entire strategy in one line, and it never works. Because you cannot control other people's behavior, you never could. And every moment you spend trying is a moment stolen from the work that would actually set you free. The alternative is radical acceptance of human nature, not approval, not endorsement, not tolerance of abuse, acceptance. The recognition that people behave the way they do because of forces operating inside them that they may not understand or even be aware of. Their behavior is the product of their wounds, their conditioning, their shadow, their stage of psychological development. It is not a personal attack on you disguised as behavior. When you truly accept this, something dissolves that you did not even know you were carrying. The exhausting, impossible project of trying to make the world behave in ways that do not trigger your unhealed material. That project consumed enormous psychological energy, and when it dissolves, that energy becomes available for something far more productive: your own development. Consider how much of your mental life is spent arguing with reality, replaying conversations, rehearsing what you should have said, fantasizing about the moment when the other person finally sees what they did wrong and apologizes. All of that mental activity is the ego's attempt to rearrange the external world so that it stops touching your internal wounds. And it never works. It has never worked. Not once in your entire life has mentally arguing with someone's past behavior changed that behavior or healed the wound it touched. Jung saw this clearly. The energy spent resenting other people is energy diverted from the only project that will actually change your experience: understanding yourself. Every hour you spend replaying an argument is an hour you could have spent asking why that argument hurt. And the answer to why it hurt will take you somewhere transformative. The replay will only take you in circles. The fourth shift is the one that makes all of this sustainable, because everything I have described so far could sound like an impossible standard. Never get triggered. See through every projection. Accept everyone exactly as they are. That sounds like the description of a saint, not a human being. But Jung was not describing sainthood. He was describing a practice, a daily, imperfect, ongoing practice of returning to awareness whenever you notice yourself getting hooked. You will still get triggered, even after years of shadow work, even after deep integration. New situations will find new hooks. People you have never met will touch wounds you did not know you had. Life will continue to surface unconscious material because that is what life does. That is its job. Individuation is not a destination. It is a direction. The difference is not that the triggers stop coming. The difference is in the speed of your recovery. Before shadow work, a trigger could consume you for days, weeks. You would replay the conversation, rehearse the argument you wished you had made, stew in resentment that poisoned every other interaction. The trigger owned you. After integration, the same trigger might land. You might feel the initial spike, but within minutes, sometimes seconds, you recognize what is happening. You see the hook. You see the wound it caught on. You feel the old pull toward reactivity, and then you make a choice, not from suppression, from understanding. You choose not to follow the reaction because you know where it leads, and you know it does not lead anywhere useful. This is what Jung meant by consciousness, not the absence of unconscious impulses, the awareness of them, the ability to see them arising without being swept away by them, to watch the wave form without being pulled under by it, and over time, with practice, something even deeper happens. The triggers that used to produce rage begin producing curiosity. You start welcoming them, not because you enjoy pain, but because you have learned that every trigger carries a piece of self-knowledge that you could not have accessed any other way. The difficult person becomes a collaborator in your individuation, an unwitting teacher, delivering exactly the lesson you needed at exactly the moment you were ready to receive it. Jung believed this reorientation, from seeing triggers as attacks to seeing them as invitations, represented one of the most significant psychological shifts a human being could make, because it transforms the entire texture of daily life. Conflict stops being something that happens to you and becomes something that happens for you. Other people's behavior stops being a problem you must manage and becomes a mirror you can learn from. And the anger, the lifelong anger that sat in your body like a second skeleton, the anger that shaped your posture and tightened your jaw and kept your nervous system locked in a state of perpetual readiness for the next attack, that anger does not leave through force. It does not leave through willpower or positive thinking or pretending it is not there. It leaves because the conditions that created it no longer exist inside you. The wounds have been seen, the shadows have been met, the hooks have been removed, and without hooks, there is nothing for the world's provocations to catch on. You become what Jung described as the individuated person, not someone who has transcended emotion, someone who has integrated it so completely that emotion serves them rather than controls them. They feel everything: grief, joy, tenderness, frustration, love, loss. But none of it owns them. They experience emotion the way a surfer experiences a wave, riding it, working with its energy, choosing when to engage and when to let it pass. That is not emotional numbness, that is emotional mastery. And it is available to anyone willing to do the work of meeting their own shadow honestly, repeatedly, and without the expectation that the work will ever be complete. Because here is the final thing Jung understood about this process: it never ends. And that is not a discouraging truth. That is a liberating one, because it means you do not have to be perfect to be at peace. You just have to be engaged, willing to look at what arises, willing to ask what the trigger is teaching you, willing to meet the parts of yourself that you have been running from since childhood. The person who does this work does not become cold. They become warm in a way that most people have never encountered. Warm without condition, present without agenda, compassionate without the hidden resentment that usually poisons compassion. Because their warmth does not cost them anything. It does not drain them. It does not require the other person to behave in a specific way. It flows from a fullness rather than from a deficit. And that warmth, that unshakable, grounded, fully integrated warmth, is the thing that no amount of anger management techniques will ever produce. It can only come from one place, the place where your shadow used to live, the place that is now occupied by understanding. If this changed how you see your own emotional reactions, subscribe to our channel. We go deeper than surface psychology here, into the material that actually restructures how you experience being alive. Hit the notification bell, because what comes next will build directly on what we covered today. And in the comments, I want to hear this. What is the one trigger you cannot seem to shake? The one person or behavior that still gets under your skin, no matter how much work you have done? Name it. Because naming it is the first step of the process I just described, and the person reading your comment might realize they share the exact same wound. That alone can be the beginning of healing.